Correct. All right, so welcome everybody. And today we have a special edition on Atman Ramayana. And having been through this course, I really thought that it's a fantastic topic for me to feature over here in this series that I've been doing every month. I want to welcome Srini K to this session. Most of you might already know Srini, but for those of you who are new to his work, Srini is is like a absolute father figure in HR in many ways. So he started in HR, runs a consulting firm called Strategist. He's a teacher, author, speaker, thinker. He also runs a foundation called Food for Thought, which has where they give books to children who are not able to access, making books more accessible to kids and so on. And Srini is obviously, kind of been featured in many places, won many awards. So absolute pleasure to have you over here, Srini. Welcome. Thank you for accepting.
Thank you. No, you've been very kind. Don't say all those things. It looks like somebody else's introduction.
No. What you deserve. So I think
Thank you.
Must help people. Yeah. All right. So we are here with Atman Ramayana. So I've been doing this series for a while, and I was thinking, to bring in certain topics which are slightly different, what people have not heard. We did something on history. We did something on unconscious bias, on wisdom. So I wanted to bring in this for this month, and absolutely excited to have this topic, featured over here. So let's kick off into the topic, and for the audience, if at any point you have questions, please raise your hand or just put it on the chat, and we'll kind of bring you in at that point of time so that it is an engaging conversation that we have. Sri, let's start with the basics. So now, what got you interested in this? Why Atman? Why Ramayana at all?
Okay, that's interesting. So why Ramayana is funny in the sense that the family is like you have always two shades. So was born and brought up in a family where mom spoke about how great Ram was, and then got married to a lady who was completely Krishna Bhakt. She is like, all Krishna. So she's a Vaishnav. So all Krishna. So Ram and Krishna have been always there. Interestingly, every time I read about Krishna, I felt more action oriented. So it was like, strategy, get things done, there is this. And every time I read Ram, there was a degree of calmness. Can you take a step back? There is a better way of doing things. Why are you doing this? So this has been going. So it was a fun balance. Still, COVID hit, and once COVID hit, the funny thing happened. That was I saw some of the best people behaving in the worst possible way. Because when we were all pushed to the corner, probably the gory side of us came up, whether it was the doctors or the hospitals or the common man, anybody. And that is when this whole thing, like that Eureka moment came in. In terms of adversity, we all become such myopic, self-serving. And how is this gentleman called Rama that in adversity, he actually personifies and behaves in the most dignified way.
Right.
And that is the tilt. And that is the day I decided to, for good or for bad, I said, for this lifetime, let me drop Krishna and focus towards Ramayana and Rama. And that is how the whole started, focusing more on that and more readings and around that. Atman Ramayana is very simple. So Atman is basically self. So for all of us, Ramayana, the definition of Ramayana is very simple. Ramayana is Rama's journey. And when we look at Atman, the whole logic was can't ourselves or self. So Atman is self. So can't my journey be something similar on the similar lines as Rama's journey? So it is interesting that just a few thousand years back, this gentleman walked around this planet, around this place, and we are walking on the same planet. And yet we are nowhere near the gold standards that he set and went away. So the whole idea of Atman Ramayana has been that can we understand his learnings, incorporate in a day-to-day life, and can we try to emulate that? So that's in short how it started and why.
Great, fantastic. So I've always had this question, in with Ramayana being reality versus myth. Okay, because it's a great story, absolutely wonderful story. The morals are very good, which is, the good wins over evil. And but then you have all these, the flying species, the bridge over a sea, floating bridge in a way, your, giants and, flying vehicle, which, Ravana uses, so on. So, and of course, there is also some evidence to some possibility that some of these things actually might have happened in, scientifically also. But what is your take? Is it a reality? Is it a myth? And, did it actually happen?
So there is enough of evidence to prove that it did happen, to the extent that exactly when did it happen. So there are books published which talked about the actual constellation of stars that's mentioned in Valmiki Ramayana. They've actually dated and plotted. So when Rama was born, they said, "Okay, this is how the stars aligned that day." And when they ran algorithms, they realized that on that particular day, which is mentioned, actually the stars were like that. To the extent that there are books published which actually have tracked the flora and fauna across the Valmiki Ramayana. So when they walked for their whole Vanvas, so there is mention that Sita picked up this kind of a flower in Chitrakoot and this kind of a flower. And when people tracked it back, those flora and fauna does exist. To the extent that if you go to Sri Lanka, the Sanjeevani Parvat which Hanuman got, there is a uplift of mountain still visible. Interestingly, in the caves of Sri Lanka, the whole flying machines are visible. There is the walls have been scripted with those flying machines. To the extent that Ravan, I believe, used to do cosmic travel. He used to do intergalaxy travel.
Wow.
And there are formulas written which we can't understand because that language doesn't exist anymore. But there are formulas written of cosmic travel. So that's the, if I may say, the scientific answer. The spiritual answer is a bit different. The spiritual answer is very simple. Is see the West or the people who believe in science and rational say if it cannot be proved, then it does not exist. Very simple. The eastern side, which we were born brought up, and in Vedas and Vedanta it is written, just because I am not aware or I haven't experienced doesn't mean it does not exist.
Yet, maybe. Yet.
Yes, yet, right? So like till few years back, I have no clue in my life that there are pink beaches existing. So in COVID, my wife one day comes and says, "Can we put it in a bucket list? I want to visit this pink beach." And I was shocked. I said, "How can a beach be pink?" And she showed me beaches in Philippines which are pink in color. So just because I am not aware of it, just because I have not experienced it, doesn't mean it does not exist. So the belief systems in the Vedics and the Vedanta, if you read, it says there is every possibility that it exists. It just that we've not experienced it doesn't mean it does not exist. And that is how you can see the both the science as well as the spiritual answer. So there is enough evidence to prove it doesn't. So it does exist, and that is there is enough evidence around that. I always go back and tell in my workshops, even for a minute, if you want to go back and believe he does not exist or this is just a story, I'm saying even though it's a story, it's a fantastic story. And there are so many things to be learned, and that is what is important.
Right.
If you're a devote or if you believe in divinity, probably you learn faster because he's higher up, you adore, you love him. So you learn faster. If you're not a devote, then it will take some more time to learn. But there are fantastic learnings from it to learn.
Fantastic. Because I've always wondered this question of, okay, Krishna spoke about Bhagavad Gita. So we know, that there's a lot of evidence and things like that. So, but in Ramayana, why is Ram even a god, right? That's the, thing that often, wondered. And that obviously the answer culminated in the fact that it's all about living a good life. That's the example that he wanted to leave behind. So, I want to ask you this whole question of, what is living a good life? What is being a good human, and, how can the story of Ramayana enlighten us on that?
Great. So that's a very interesting question. Now, the answer is very simple there, and we've jumbled up and mixed up and we goofed up, if I may say.
Mm.
So the definition of good life is happy life, and the definition of good life is not successful life.
Right.
Unfortunately, what has pop psychology done? The pop psychology or the capitalist way of looking at things, it says a good life is successful life. And then they have sweetly defined successful life means you need to have a Mercedes, you need to have a 100-inch TV. If you don't have 4 bedroom, then it's not a good life. And why? Because that whole economy or the capitalism runs on consumption. So the more you consume, the better it is for them. But if you look at what Ramayana teaches or what any of the scriptures teaches is the answer of good life is being happy life. So whatever you get happiness is what will do. Ramayana specifically talks about the whole concept of Maryada. Have you conducted yourself in Maryada? And Maryada means there is a fine balance between your Kartavya and Karuna. So Kartavya is nothing but your duty bound. So if you came into this planet as you are Sri Ram and I am Srini, there is a purpose in which we need to conduct ourselves. So there is a Kartavya, there is a dharma that we have to play. And the second thing which Ramayana talks about is, do you have the karuna, the compassion in which you conduct yourself? So if you are able to do this fine balance, now this same logic you can extend to say, the Chinese way of looking at yin and yang, or you can look at masculine, feminine energies. Everywhere you will find the references of that. So today our challenge is we conduct ourselves, but is it in regard to the Maryada? Then there is a big doubt. Because for some reason we've got into this rat race. And interestingly, I keep quoting this always things, we decided to evolve from apes to become humans. So why are we stuck at being rats? So I get surprised by that. I always keep asking this question to everybody. We all decided to evolve. And if we decided to evolve from apes, the gold standard is to be a human. So why are we stuck at being rats? And that's how the economy is the capitalism beautifully defines it. They ensure that you fall into the trap of consumption and make you believe that the definition of a good life is the more you consume, the better it is. But eventually, you realize as you read, you will realize that the definition of typically good life is not successful life, but the happy life. And happiness comes from actually contributing, not consuming. It could be as simple as that. I keep telling this, do this test very simple. In a day, you just express gratitude to 5 people. It could be the liftman, it could be the guy who serves you tea, it could be anybody. And you come back and sleep in the night. I can bet you will have a far better sleep rather than going into a 5-star and consuming probably all the dishes in the menu. So consumption will never take us there, but contribution does.
Fantastic. Because even when I'm defining happiness and I'm trying to, kind of work with that concept for workplaces, largely I speak about 3 things. One is that, living your purpose, which is
Correct.
Use your strengths, use your skills, use your unique gifts to make a difference.
Yes.
Use your skills to make a difference. When you make a difference, you give value. When you give value, you get value. I think that equation we know from our, kind of whole thing of the way the world works. You give value,
Correct.
you get value, right? That's the first, element of that.
Yes.
The second element is, of course, the whole aspect of becoming a better human. I think how do we live, with gratitude, with appreciation, with less anger, less frustration, resentment, more forgiveness, and so on. And the last element that I bring in is that live a holistic life. Often now, what's happened is that we are living life in only one dimension of career and money. Right? Forgetting that, after, and even now, if you talk to people are saying, after I get so much money, then I will think about it. And that after I get never ends, right? It keeps going. And by the time you're ready to enjoy life, many things have gone past.
No, absolutely. And in fact, what you nicely put it. So in Vedanta, it is written we have 7 dharmas to fulfill at any given point of time. And self well-being is just one of them.
Correct.
there are 6 other things that we are supposed to do concurrently, starting from taking care of the universe or the planet which we live in, to taking care of the community, to taking care of the family and relations that we have, to that. But we are so self-consumed in a way that we believe those things will fall into place as it is. So I give a very interesting anecdote. I say, why do you need to take care of the planet? So, and this is the statistics. It is scary statistics, but you can Google and see. So we are in the 10,000th year of Kali Yuga. So Kali Yuga is 10,000 years old approximately. And any guesses how many more years to be gone before Kali Yuga ends? It is 4,32,000 years.
Wow.
So there is still 4,32,000 years before the planet is supposed to collapse and the Kali and everything would come. So what is the kind of a planet we are living for our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren? Just imagine, there are going to be at least another 2,000 generations to come after us from our lineage. And if this is the planet that we are living full of plastic and, with no trees and just barren lands, then what are they going to live? So it is not that Kali Yuga is going to get over by 2020 or 2025 or 2200, so another 100 years, let's enjoy maximum. We still have 4,32,000 years to take care of. And we are not ready to lay that foundation. We are so preoccupied with ourselves. We are so preoccupied with what we are doing. And, we are very happy with the idea of, okay, another 10 years or another 20 years. And if I'm doing it, that's good to go. And what we see, Bangalore water crisis to others, is just a blip. The more to come if you don't take care of it.
Correct. I think it's all about, fundamentally it's greed. That is what I can see, right? Fundamentally, it is, and we've also been that way. When I was younger,
Yes.
perhaps our wisdom was lesser, and we would say, okay, I have the money, so why not? And then you eventually come to a point where you realize that, okay, even if you can afford it, it doesn't make sense for you to do it. But and I think, yeah.
So the interesting that I always say that, and I'm glad you brought this point up. The unfortunate part is, okay, the economy is going to make you believe that you're always inadequate. So you get surprised that in India, the men's fairness cream is a 3,000 crore market. Now, when we were growing up, we were told, you need to be tall, dark, handsome. We were never told to be fair, but still fairness cream sells 3,000 crores. So that inadequacy is going to be pumped by the market all the time. Srini, you're not good enough if you don't have a 100-inch TV. Srini, you're not good enough if you don't have 3 cars waiting for you, and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
The beauty is, when do we draw the pact with prosperity?
Correct.
Today, we don't have that pact with prosperity. So I don't know how much is enough for me. So it is surprising when Jayalalitha dies, they find out she's got 340 pairs of shoes left. Now, why would anybody need 340 pairs of shoes? I still can't fathom that, You can have 5, 10, maybe 20, but 340 pairs of shoes. So the challenge for all of us today is that drawing that pact with prosperity. And why we are not able to draw pact with prosperity? Because every day when I on the television or any news, it will always keep me feeling that you are inadequate. The second thing that you find is interesting in us is, in a collective society like us, it's always the comparisons.
Correct.
So I always call the Sharmaji ka beta syndrome, The Virat Kohli, the day he scored 50th century and he was the greatest man on planet for cricket, probably mom would have told him, Sharmaji ka beta ka dekho, he got India to the finals. You couldn't get it.
Yeah.
And that comparison also drives me to consume more and more, because I see Sriram having a bigger TV than me. I see Sriram having more gadgets than me, and probably that drives me to grow into that. But that doesn't help somewhere. That greed will not help you. Correct. What did greed do to Ravan? It is very interesting. If you read Ramayana, Mandodari, Ravan's wife, is supposed to be the second or third most beautiful woman on the planet Earth at that given point of time. And yet he falls for Sita. And Sita is supposed to be his daughter or granddaughter's age. So it's not that they're equal match. So there is conversations between Mandodari and Ravan. She says she is supposed to be daughter or granddaughter has yet to fall for her.
Hmm.
But that greed and lust of his, he says, "Okay, so what's the big deal? If I like it, I should have it." And that is what drives us. And finally, that's what Ravan wants to. So for us, it is important to understand that if we don't draw the pact with prosperity, we will always have the challenge of getting caught off guard.
Yeah. So let's get into the leadership aspect of this. And I think, that is a good segue to get into the ego element, right? Fundamentally, Ravan was a, scholar. He was,
Yes.
he had a lot of skills. He was even spiritual in many ways. And yet, I think it was, in a way, it was the ego which kind of brought in that downfall. And many times in our current reality, we can clearly see the ego of others from their
Yes.
expression to their tone to their body language to just about everything, right? We can just seal it and, oh, okay, that's the attitude, right? But often we fail, and especially as leaders, we fail to see our own, kind of ego. So, from the context of Ramayana, what is your advice for leaders on the specific aspect of ego? Because I don't see it discussed, even if you look at all the Western texts, right? They never talk about ego at all. You will see all, kind of things. Humility and ego are never kind of thing. It's a more Eastern concept slowly with
Yes.
Satya Nadella and others being showcased. It's kind of coming forward. But otherwise, it's not there in even in the, in the texts or even in the studies that they have. Go ahead.
So the answer is very simple for that, in the sense that if you see, most of the modern management principles and theories have come from military. So
Hmm.
today you look, everything that is derived comes from the military. So like simple words like command center, line and staff. This is all military terms that we still use.
Yeah.
In military, it was clearly articulated and told that you need to be a macho, you need to be a cowboy to be able to lead your forces.
Hmm.
So, and especially like people like Napoleon, who are 5 feet 2 inch, very short people, and not having that persona because of their personality, they tend to show it more aggression.
Hmm.
So by default, aggression and leadership became a coexisting word. And when the whole corporate evolved, when Frederick Taylor and others started writing and picking,
Hmm.
their reference point was always the military leadership. And they said, okay, if you want to be a good leader in the corporate, then you need to emulate some of those behavior, which is like being macho, not showing your vulnerabilities. You don't have weaknesses.
Hmm.
You are in the face. And the problem is that once you start talking like that and people start agreeing to you, your brain is smart enough to make you feel that you really arrived in life.
Hmm.
So the brain starts playing games on you, and then that is where your ego hits. And then that whole blind spot comes in where you think, whatever you've said is right, and whatever you are saying is true. And that is where we've seen most of the leaders' downfall happening. If you see some of the leaders who have fallen from the crest all of a sudden, it's all because of their ego, which didn't let them see. They were so self obsessed
Hmm.
and they had such huge blind spot, they just didn't see what was happening wrong around them, and they were not ready to listen to others. So why is that so prevalent? Because of the simple reason is our whole inspiration comes from the military sciences, and in military sciences it's still applicable today.
Hmm.
Where I cannot go as a commanding officers and express my vulnerabilities, or I cannot go back and say, I'm feeling scared, or no, I have to be that macho guy in the face saying, okay, let's go and kill them, that, and then we'll have a dinner for tonight. But in corporates, over the years, we've realized that is not working.
Hmm.
Like if you get surprised, there's an interesting Harvard article got published. What were the top 7 countries which managed COVID the best?
Hmm.
5 of those countries were led by women. So there is
Wow.
a clear data showing that feminine energy today is far better in leading organizations than masculine energy.
Correct.
So I will not focus on the gender, but I'll say the energy. So Satya Nadella is a classic example of feminine energy. You talk to him, you hear his speeches. He never uses masculine words. He's very compassionate, very clear about it. Same is with Sundar, same is with others.
Yeah.
So the whole world has started realizing that. You look at the organizations, you look at, say, for example, Tata's logo, Mahindra's logo, how they got changed in last 10 years, Airtel logo. All were masculine logos have now converted being very feminine logos.
Yeah.
So the world is shifting there, and as leaders, we need to quickly realize that false bravado and masculinity is not going to take us anywhere. And it's perfectly okay to show our vulnerabilities. It is perfectly okay to go back and ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is a very interesting story. So Rama is considered to be all this. So when Sita gets abducted and Rama falls, and that's the only time in Ramayana he actually cries. So when he's crying, his eyes are all moist and he can't see things. And they get the jewels and say, "Can you tell that these jewels belong to Sita?"
Mm.
And he doesn't take even a minute to say, "I can't figure it out. I'm not in a state of mind. Lakshman, can you please help me?"
Right.
He doesn't have any qualms saying, "I need to build a bridge," and he goes and asks people, "Ki, all of you, can you come and help me?" Whether it is Nal or Neel or anybody.
Mm.
So there is enough and more examples from Ramayana. So even though Rama is supposed to be the all-encompassing hero, he still is okay showing his vulnerability. He's still okay going and seeking for help. He still have the courage to ask help,
Yeah.
and he doesn't fall into the trap of pride and ego, whereas Ravan does.
Mm.
In fact, in one of the commentaries, it is very interestingly written that Ravan was not killed by Ram, but he was killed by his ego. So,
Yeah.
the whole scripture starts with that saying Ravan was not killed by Ram, but he was killed by his own ego. If he wouldn't had that ego, he would have happily lived for another whatever so many years.
Correct.
So that is something for us as leaders to remember.
Yeah. No, I think on the point of vulnerability, right? I still see that that's, we've started talking about it, but just the way that we talk about failures and it's okay to fail, but really there is no evidence that people can see that failure is okay, right? Because most times the commentary and the reward mechanism is not really built to support that. And then we keep saying, oh, no, no, you stretch and you do. Why will somebody stretch and, risk failure? And that is why most times you are, always limiting your, kind of growth in many ways.
Absolutely. I always keep asking this to CEOs whom I coach and I talk to. Okay, how many of you have actually have a graveyard in your office? And
Hmm.
they get surprised saying, "What does that mean, Srini?" And I say, okay, how many of you have proudly showcased your failures?
Hmm.
I believe I've not seen it, but I've heard this folklore that Finolex is the only company in India which in its reception has Hall of Fame and Hall of Failures.
Wow. Hmm.
And they have blatantly, they go back and I believe share with their employees saying, okay, people have been here, people have failed, they have not got sacked, they've actually got promoted over the years. So it is perfectly okay to fail, we are okay with that.
Great.
So as leaders, if we don't showcase it, so again, Harvard has written very interesting thing some time back, says okay, behaviors that get rewarded get repeated.
Hmm.
And our whole reward mechanisms today are built or designed in not expressing failure, but showing this false bravado of saying, "Hey, I have done I'm God's gift to mankind." And hence, people are scared to fail. People are scared to take risk, and we don't talk about it.
Okay, so let's dive into Duvida or the dilemma, right? Of it's always a tough one for leaders, and perhaps there are significant pointers in Ramayana on that particular, kind of thing, especially in session. Some of the stories that stuck with me were on that particular aspect. So, can you share some stories and some lessons on the aspect of Duvida, which is basically the dilemmas that people deal with?
Absolutely. So one of the interesting things they say is, so in Greek mythology also there are stories around that which says, uh, gods were one day very curious, if we had flaws, how will we look like?
Hmm.
And that is why they created humans, right? So there are folklores like that. There is another story in Vedanta which says that one day Lakshmi was very upset, saying, telling Vishnu, that every day afternoon when you have food, you have your siesta, and I get bored. So why don't we do something? Why don't we play a game? And they decided to play a game, and that game is what this earth and existence of earth is. So we are supposed to be a game which they are playing till now. The day they decide to fold the game, Kali Yuga is over, and I believe we are all supposed to go back into that box, right? So by default, the design is ki, as humans, we are going to have dilemmas. And the interesting thing, Dr. Uday Pratap, who is one of the greatest poets in Hindi literature, he writes a very nice couplet. कि ये कैसी विडंबना थी कि जब सीता जंगल में थी तो उसको सोने का हिरण चाहिए था, और जब वो सोने की लंका पहुंची थी तो उसको राम चाहिए था.
Nice.
And Sita was not an ordinary lady, she was the one of the greatest people in the earth. The kind of competencies, the kind of skills she had is no bars. Yet she falls for that dilemma, yet she falls for the temptation, and yet she falls through it. And we are like, if 1/10 of her, so it is by default, it is designed that we are going to face dilemmas. And that is where Ramayana gives us the message. Every time you fall into a dilemma, you have to ensure that you're following the dharma. And following dharma is the critical most part. So there is this whole great debate that keeps happening, how can Rama leave his beloved wife Sita just because somebody said something?
Right.
The answer is very simple. As a husband, he had 100% faith on her, but the dharma of the king comes over husband. And as a king, the rule book clearly said that none of the people from the royal family will be gossiped anywhere. And that's why he just asked her to leave. And when they did the yajna and all that, he never got married. He kept a gold statue, whereas it was very okay in those days to have multiple wives. So for us, the answer is very simple. Every time we go through dilemmas, we have to check what the dharma or what the rule book says. And the rule book cannot change conveniently for me because it is me, so I will change the rule book. Or today I'm in a good mood, so I'll follow the rule book. Tomorrow I'm in a bad mood, so I'll not follow the rule book. It will not happen that way. And that is where the big dilemma for all of us is. Today, some of us are able to follow the rule book consistently, and there are some of us who fall, as mere mortals at every other trap. So it is as simple as that. It may be night 10 o'clock, nobody is on the road, but if there is a red light, I have to stop.
Correct.
I cannot take the jury in my hand and say nobody is looking, so let me jump the signal. Because that can't happen. Because every time we decide to deviate, those dilemmas will only keep going bigger and bigger. So how is it possible for HR to go back and say, oh, I like Sriram, so his notice period is waived off, you can go tomorrow. And I don't like Srini, so he has to serve 3 months notice period. Or how is that possible that somebody gets a joining bonus and somebody doesn't get a joining bonus? So the dilemma for us is going to be there. And for us, what is the biggest challenge is our ability to be able to draw that fine line and stick to it. Today, if Rama is Rama because he followed the rule book, starting from the fact when he was asked to. So there is a very interesting conversation between Dashrath and Rama in one of the books.
Yeah.
Where Dashrath tells Rama, you are my Senapati or the general, so why don't you overthrow me and take over the kingdom so that you don't have to follow these 2 promises that I made and you don't have to leave.
Right.
And Rama asked him a simple question. He said, the promises that you made to Kaikeyi were as a husband or as a king?
Right.
Because if you made it as a husband, so probably I can think of following or not following. But if you made it as a king, then there is no question of me not following. So there are enough instances written there where we need to be very clear that the dilemmas that we face through are very ordinary. We've complicated it. And today, if you look at convenience has taken over convention. So whatever is convenient to me, I will do. Whatever is convention, I'll park it. If it is convenient to me, then I'll follow the convention and then take a brownie point from you. Otherwise, I'll go back and follow convenience.
Right. Basically, I think the whole essence of that is always take the high ground, take the moral high ground, act in grace, to the extent that your consciousness allows, always act in grace. And it's tough. It's tough, when you are in that position of a true, kind of dilemma, which has, equal weightages. It's really tough to make that choice. But I think that's what finally builds your character. Your character.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and there are very interesting. When you read Ramayana, and that is what brings you down to earth to realize what a long way to go. So there is a very interesting incident. So Mandodari is upset that Ravan every day goes to Sita when he has abducted her and pleads her, "Ki, take me as your husband, take me as your husband." So one day, as a jealous and as an upset wife, she tells Ravan, you are shapeshifter. You can take any shape. So why don't you become Ram and go to her? Because when you become Ram and go to her, then she will accept you, and then the chapter is finished. You live your life, I'll live my life. Every day, I don't have to see my husband coming back insulted.
Mm.
And Ravan very cheapishly smiles and says to her, saying, Ki, don't you think I have tried that? And then he says this very interesting line, which he says, Ki, every time I took the form of Ram, every other lady besides you looked like my mother to me. And he says, and that is what is the dilemma, he says, कि हर पराई नारी मुझे जननी लगती.
Right.
And that is the standard. So even thinking about him or even taking his form, if that is what the dharma does, then you can understand, why that gentleman is called God and why do we pray and why do those belief systems have stayed with us for 5,000 years plus. Because he says that, and today also you will see many poets writing about it and all that. So that's the true part, what you rightly said. I agree.
Yeah. So I want to pause here for a question that came from
Yes.
Anton. He had written, okay. So he says that the wisdom premise about leadership is first transform yourself, then transform the world around you. And his question is about the second step. So assume that I have transformed myself as a leader, then what? How do I grow my positive impact on the team? Just naturally, or is something more that is specifically needed?
Okay, so the answer is in two steps. The day we transform ourselves, there is that infectious energy that will pass to others. So people around us are extremely smart, right? And they observe everything. So today, one of the biggest challenges is, as leaders, is people say the boss says something, and he is actually something else. So, for example, the executive council will pass a message to everybody saying the economy is not doing well, we will do cost cutting. And after 1 week, I see the boss in Hawaii with his family having a gala time. Or I see the executive council having their next meet in Greece or Hawaii. And with social media being so prevalent around, everybody knows about everybody so much that if you're not authentic, then people go back and say, I don't see him as a leader. But moment people see you as authentic, moment people see you as one of those leaders who's very authentic, they will start transforming themselves. We don't even have to go and push them. And that is why it happens. It is like very simple example I'll keep giving. Now, when we go to temples or when you go to churches or mosques, why do we suddenly transform? Because the whole energy around that gives you that vibes to tell you, okay, your normal behavior is not acceptable here, so please keep it outside, walk in as a new person. The same thing happens with teams. When people see their boss behaving in a particular fashion, which is very authentic, they transform. The part two is when you take a moral stand and say this is not acceptable, there is a degree of authority that comes to you by default because that conviction is there in you, because you yourself are not going to do it. And that conviction helps you to transform that energy back to the team. Today, one of the challenges we have is since we ourselves are not convinced, somewhere we ourselves have that black sheep in us saying, oops, if I was pushed to that, I may not do it. But for the sake of saying, I'll use some fancy English and, probably raise my tone, texture, volume, and I'll say, no, this better get it done. That is past. That is past. People can easily figure it out. We are smart adults, so people do figure it out. So the answer would be yes. And that's why we talk about whether sixth level reader or authentic leaders and all that. That's where that whole philosophy is coming from. If we are authentic, it becomes that much easy.
And I think the way, I would also look at that is I see that leadership has three dimensions. One is, of course, leading ourself, leading the self, right? Which is
Right.
where the element of, the personal development, personal growth kind of comes in. Then there is the element of leading the team. There, my take is I think you need to have certain principles of how
Yes.
you will operate, which are quite explicit and which has to translate into behavior, habits, decisions, which keep, trying to do because you'll never get it perfect as a thing.
Correct.
You always have an ideal, but then you're always trying to live up to that ideal as a thing. The last element, of course, is, of course, leading the organization, which is all about your impact, your results, your society, CSR, ESG, and all of those
Correct.
aspects. I think that's the three-dimensional, way perhaps in which we can, kind of look at this. So let's kind of move on. So which is the story that you like the most and why?
Oh, that's a not trick one.
Yeah,
So there are multiple stories, but I will pick, say, one or two of them.
sure.
So there's a very interesting anecdote. So when Jatayu the vulture fights with Ravan, and Ravan cuts his bodies into various pieces, and he's lying on the ground and he's about to die, and that is when Ram reaches to him. And Ram has tears in his eyes, but the tears are not shedding. And so everybody is surprised. Why tears are not shedding? So they ask Ram at the evening, saying, why didn't you shed a tear? And his answer is very simple. He said, my tears have salt. And if my tears would have fallen on his body, it would have hurt him more. And he's already hurt, and I don't want to hurt him more.
Wow.
And that personifies Karuna for me. How can somebody be so compassionate? How can somebody be so, what we say, grounded and be so, caring for somebody, and yet be able to, do that kind of a thing? The other interesting story that I always find is in Kamba Ramayana, it is written when the invite for the coronation of Rama was sent, it is written you are invited for the coronation of Dharma. And everybody's name is written and Rama's name is not there. And the significance of that, they say, is that by that time Rama was equal to Dharma. And they said coronation of Rama and coronation of Dharma is same.
Right.
The other interesting thing which I always, so last one, I'll just take one more story, but that is also very interesting, I find it, because that talks about, how the karmic cycle works. So when Rama's time came to the end, the god of death, Yamraj, came and said, it's time and we have to go. So he comes down and he's walking up to Rama, and Hanuman sees him. So Hanuman says, get lost, I'm not letting you to take my divine, right? And Yamraj is surprised. He says, that's not the deal. The deal is his time is ended, he has to move. So Yamraj doesn't know what to do. So he walks into Rama's dreams and says, you understand, your time is up and you have to come with me. But Hanuman is not letting. So Rama smiles and says, okay, let's catch up tomorrow, whatever, at 10 o'clock in the garden. So Yamraj says, okay. So at 9:30, Rama tells Hanuman, let's go for a walk. And as they're walking, so Rama starts fiddling with his ring. So that's the ring that actually Shivji has given to Sita, and Sita is passed on to Rama. And he drops the ring in the crack of the earth. And he says, oops, my ring has fallen. Hanuman, can you please help me get it? So Hanuman being Hanuman, he says, he shrinks himself, he goes down and he says, I'll get it. And he goes to the Patal Lok. And at that time, Yamraj comes and takes away Ram. So when Hanuman goes to the Patal Lok, and the king of Patal Lok is keen, and he says, "How come you're here?" And he says, "I've come for Rama's ring."
Hmm.
And he says, "Okay." So he shows him to a bunch of rings and says, "Which ring are you talking of?"
Hmm.
So that is when it dawns to Hanuman that this has happened before, and this will happen again.
Right.
And the big lesson for us out of that is we are in that karmic cycle. And it is very important that everything that we do every day is adding to a balance sheet.
Yeah.
And that balance sheet will get tallied at some point of time. So whether I am kind to that liftman, whether I am kind to that fellow colleague, whether I am nice to somebody is going to help that balance sheet grow up. And it is going to be decided where that karma is going to take us. So it is important for us to understand, at least in Eastern philosophies, life is not linear like the West, where you have one life where it begins and ends. For us, it's a circle.
Correct.
And that circle is going to keep coming back.
Mm.
And we have every day opportunity to make that circle better for us and for others.
Yeah.
So these are some of the stories that always fascinate me because they keep you grounded, I think, because consulting spoils you. Every day when you walk into the boardroom and you see so much of power around you, it is important once in a while to ground you, and that is what Ramayana does. It just brings you down and says, "Okay, this is all a myth. This too shall pass away."
Right. No, and I think especially on the karmic thing, right? When we're talking of purpose and things like that, I've always seen purposes as three parts. Your material purpose, which is about your skills. There is a karmic purpose and there is a spiritual purpose. Your karmic purpose explains, sometimes you say, I've been a good person. Why is this happening to me? And, how come this happened and things like that, right? Then only explanation for that comes from your karmic purpose, right? When you
Yes.
go in, you understand that yeah, this is a play. This is a play. There are multiple things. But the important lesson for you is how do you still act with grace in that moment
Yes.
that you're in trouble?
Absolutely. In fact, if you ask me to tweet Ramayana in one tweet, my tweet will be dignity in face of adversity.
Fantastic.
And that sums up Ramayana for me, nothing else.
Yeah.
I always say, how can somebody be so dignified in spite of all the adversities that are happening? And
Fantastic.
that is what Ramayana is all about to me. And I keep asking that, and I keep telling myself also the same. How dignified can we be?
Yeah.
Interestingly, we can be very dignified if things are normal, things are in our control, things go as per our thing.
Yeah.
The whole interesting thing happens the moment we're pushed to the corner, like what COVID did. Suddenly, the whole dignity went out of the toss. I remember paying 2 lakhs per day to hospital just to take care of my dad. And for no reason, they just went back and said, "You need to pay a couple of lakhs every day, then only we'll admit." So it is very interesting to see, and these doctors are friends. It's not that they're aliens. We drink, we danced over the years, we grew old together. But that whole dignity went out of the door the moment we were hit to the wall, and everybody wanted to make their big villa, have another 2 villas, and they were perfectly okay with the idea. And then here is a gentleman who comes and says, "The more challenges you put me in, the more dignified I'll come across." And that is what it is. So what you're saying is absolutely right. In fact, for purpose, there is a very interesting clip. I always keep reminding. So there is a movie called Ashoka, which Shah Rukh Khan made. Not a great
Right.
movie, but it's an interesting clip in that. So when Ashoka, the king Ashok is a teenager, and he's fascinating to become a king and all that. So he's playing with some kids with swords. And there are monks who are walking across, and one of the monks sees him and says, "Tumhara bhavishya ujjwal hai. Your future is very bright." And he, like any other teenager, says, "Acha, to kya main samrat banunga?" So he asks whether I'll become a king.
Yeah.
And the monk smiles and tells him, "Tum to samrat se bhi upar jaoge. So you will go on to become somebody greater than a samrat." And Ashoka is very curious. He says, "What is greater than samrat?" Because for him, that's the end goal. And the monk tells him, "You will become that traveler who will reach his destination. तुम वो यात्री बनोगे जो अपनी यात्रा पूरी करेगा." So
Nice.
today, our challenge in this corporate world is we think becoming that next vice president or next CHRO or next CEO is our yatra. But that is only Samrat as a destination. The day we hit 50, and the day we hit 60, and the day we retire,
Mm,
don't be surprised if the same set of people start ignoring us, don't pick our calls,
mm,
don't give us so many likes on LinkedIn posts. Suddenly you're nobody.
yeah.
And that is when that whole hits you saying, oh God, what was it?
Mm,
And at that time, when we try to course correct, trying to say, I'll go and tell my sons I want to spend time with you because I have time. They're already in their lives and saying, Papa, now we are into our lives. We don't have time for you. So it is important for us to understand, to figure out that purpose. Our purpose is not to become samrat. Our purpose is to be that yatri who apni yatra puri karega. And like you rightly said, that yatra is a holistic view. It has some bit of materialism, because materialism is not bad. Interestingly, in all the Hindu scriptures, it is clearly written. Vishnu is known as Mayapati.
mm.
So Maya isn't bad. The whole question is not having that pact with prosperity and not knowing how much is too much. Today, our challenge is that in life, we don't know how much is too much. So everything, like we are like that small kid who's taken to Hamleys for the first time.
Mm.
Every toy available there, I want it. And as adults, we are also like that. Every time we walk into some place, we get excited and we want everything, and not knowing whether how much is too much.
Okay, so I'm going to pause here and just tell the audience that Srini runs a 3-day program called Atman Ramayan, which the first cohort of which I attended, and I highly recommend the program. I was, from everything, from the fact of how it's been designed, through the modern assessments, the introspection part of it, the stories, the material, the setting, next to the river, and the practices that we had. I still have that broken bowl that right in front of me to remind me of the fact that life is imperfect, and I shouldn't look for perfection. So some fantastic takeaways for me over there. So why don't you talk a little bit about the program, Srini? We have a link in the chat for people who are interested in knowing more. We also have the contact details over there if you want to reach out. And we'll also send a follow-up mail with the details in case you're interested. But quickly, if you can just tell us a little bit about Atman Ramayan, we'll then take some audience questions and close.
Sure, sure. No, first of all, thank you very much for being sharing such kind words for the program. The program was designed very simply to help pause and reflect, if I may say. And the program consists of 9 modules. So typically the program starts with what we call as a self-assessment, which is Maryada Compass. In fact, that Maryada Compass is free for all. So you don't even have to attend a program if you want to do a self-assessment. It is completely free. What Maryada Compass does is it's kind of modeled on the 360-degree format. So it tells what is your self-assessment on those 9 dimensions, whether it is greed or whether it is ego, whether it is humility or whether it is bhakti. How are you seeing yourself, and how are your loved ones seeing yourself? So it will basically tell you what are your blind spots and all that. And what we've done in the 3-day program is we've created a lot of spaces for reflection and for introspection. So the first principle that we go back and use there is nobody has to share the scores. So it's a safe space. It is with you. It is for you to work on you. We are not interested in your scores. What we've also done is, interestingly, we put a lot of Eastern philosophy concepts like Kintsugi to Ikigai to Nachi to even Hawaiian like Opono and all that, which helps you to actually activate those learnings into action items and then build around that. Objective being very simple, we are all smart individuals. We are all smart adults who know. So we are not so much interested in how to course correct. So interestingly, those 3 days, not a single preachy thing will come to anybody saying this is what you should do. It's only thing is why you should do. So the idea is if I trigger the why, then how you will figure out through Google. I don't have to be there. So that's what it is. And thank you for such a nice feedback, because it is always unnerving to do those workshops, because many of the people who walk in are highly accomplished in their life, have done everything, and like yourself itself, you've seen the world, you've been there, and suddenly if I have to come back and say, there is still a scope of improvement to be a better version of yourself. But that's both the challenge and the fun part.
Yeah. No, easily one of the best programs, really, easily.
Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So we'll take some audience questions. Again, the details are in the chat. If people want to go through more details, please do that. There's a question on the chat from Dr. Asim Saxena, and he says, how to overcome the dilemma when a person starts trying to find sorrow during the time of joy?
So the idea is so that comes basically from our upbringing of guilt. So see, we've grown up. So today, if you look at us, we are probably the first generation of the independent India thing. So we've seen a lot of scarcity around us. And we grew up in an ecosystem where we were told ki don't express your joy, or if you feel joyous, then don't talk about it because it is not a good virtue. Why?
Mm.
Because there is so much scarcity around you. So if you express your joy, then basically you're trying to put it on my face, kind of thing.
Show off.
Show off. So today, what has happened that has got so much imbibed in us? Today, when something good happens to us or something happy happens to us, it is very difficult for us to adjust to that. So invariably, we start looking what is that half emptiness in that glass, and then try to look for that sorrow, because somewhere we are trying to justify to ourselves and say, oh, okay, I'm not happy, kind of thing. But it is that guilt we have to get away. So if you look at today's generation, and I like that thing about our youngsters, okay, they are such, in the face, they're completely okay with the guilty pleasures they have. So whether it's a Virat Kohli on the field who's explicit, and he can use explicit words when he's angry, to somebody going and saying, I want to buy another car, it's okay. We don't have to feel bad about it just because others are not having it, because was our good karma. I get surprised every time I read how Taylor Swift's dog has its own chartered plane to get pedicure done. And I say, wow, that's a dog's life, where you have your chartered flight to get your pedicure done. But that's the good karma of that dog for whatever reason he or she did. So that's what it is. So I think we have to move away from that guilt to get rid of it.
Okay. So any questions from the audience? And there's a request for us to take a picture also of everybody. If people can come on the video, we'll take a screenshot of people who are here. Whoever it's possible for you to come on, please come on. Okay, we have more people coming. Thank you, Funny, for the suggestion. Yeah, appreciate it. All right. Okay, a few more to go. All right, one more. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate it. Any questions from anybody in the audience? We'll just go over by a couple of minutes, but if you have any comments, questions, anything that you want to say, please feel free.
Sriram, thanks for this wonderful session. I missed the one at ASCII, and I was kicking myself for it. And Srini, as always, fantastic. I mean, the way that you explain is just phenomenal. Thanks, Sriram, once again.
Thank you.
Anything else from anybody? Okay, there's a question. Is Dharma religion, Srini? While we wait for others, is Dharma religion?
No, Dharma isn't religion. Dharma is about being just and right. And it is basically following principles which have been set. And the idea of, in fact, yesterday Supreme Court also talked about the same thing. Justice has not only to be fair, but justice also has to be seen to be fair. So the whole logic of distributive and procedural justice is what Dharma is all about. We need to come across as fair, and we need to be also fair in the way we conduct ourselves. So Dharma is not religion.
Great. Anybody else wants to say anything before we close? Any comments from anyone? Okay, people are saying good things, Srini. Any closing comments from you before we end? Thank you.
So the closing comment from me would be very simple, saying that we need to be comfortable with the idea of science and spirituality in India.
Mm.
It will never be or, it will always be and. So you will always have a Rajnath Singh who went to France to take charge of the Rafale aircrafts. And I don't know how many of you seen that photograph, but while taking the charge of Rafale aircraft, he kept a lemon and chili below the tire of the aircraft and made the pilot go over it. And everybody had this saying, what are we doing? Or we will always be like this. Before we send the aircraft to the moon by ISRO, these important critical parts will be taken to a temple and we'll pray it. So as a country, as citizens of this country, we need to be extremely comfortable with the idea of science and spirituality coexisting. And we'll always keep evolving. See, one of the beauty of this, Hinduism has been that we are completely comfortable with the idea of evolving with every age. We will keep changing our rituals. We will keep adding, we'll keep deleting, and we will keep doing that. So my only takeaway would be that let us not fall into this to be either of the two buckets. If I'm spiritual, I will not believe in science, or if I'm science or rational driven, I will not believe in spirituality. We will coexist, and that manthan will always happen. That tug of war will always happen between science and spirituality. And out of that manthan will the Amrut come, and that Amrut is the goodwill for this country as we progress. So that will be my passing remark. Stay comfortable with this chaos around us.
Yeah. I think even for organizations, my thing is that the future is going to be both high tech and high touch.
Yes.
I think it's only high tech, but it's not. It's going to be high tech and high touch. That is the bliss point, I think, for corporates. If you can find that combination, I think, organizations are going to flourish. And I think on that note, thank you, Srini. Thank you, everybody, for taking time and being here. And if you have the time, if you're in India, please do attend the workshop. It's completely worth your time. I would highly recommend it. Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you so much.
See you on the next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.